This morning, you ate bread without thinking about it. In Rome, 1 million people did the exact same thing, every single morning, for 500 years. But their bread didn't come from a bakery down the street. It came from ships, thousands of them, crossing the entire Mediterranean. And the day those ships stopped sailing, the greatest empire in history had less than 40 years left to live. The barbarians didn't kill Rome, not the Christians, not the lead in the pipes. Bread did. To understand what bread meant to Rome, you have to understand the city itself. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had passed 1 million people. That doesn't sound impressive today. But think about this. No European city would reach that number again for another 1,700 years. Not Paris, not London, not Constantinople, nobody. Rome was the first megacity in human history, built without electricity, without engines, without a single machine. And every morning, all 1 million of them needed to eat. Here's the part that should blow your mind. Rome didn't grow its own food. Not a single grain. The fields around the city couldn't feed even a fraction of the population. So Rome did something no civilization had ever done before. It outsourced its stomach. Every year, 1,500 ships were sailing toward Rome. From Egypt, from Tunisia, from Sicily. Wooden holes packed with wheat, bobbing across a sea controlled entirely by the Roman navy. To feed one city, an entire empire had to keep moving. And 1/5 of those Romans, 200,000 men, didn't pay for their bread. They got it for free, every single month, from the state. It was the world's first welfare program, and it ran like clockwork for 500 years. Until one day, it didn't. To understand how Rome got here, we have to go back. Way back. Before the empire, before the Caesars. The year is 123 BC. Rome is still a republic. And a politician named Gaius Gracchus passes a law that will change history forever. His idea was simple. Give the poor citizens cheap grain, subsidized by the state, just for a while. A safety net. It was supposed to be temporary. But here's the thing about feeding people. Once you start, you can't stop. Within a generation, the cheap grain became free grain. The safety net became a guarantee. And the number of Romans who depended on it kept growing, from 40,000 to 100,000 to 200,000 to over 300,000 mouths to feed every single month, paid for by the state. We don't have a modern equivalent. Imagine if New York City was required, by law, to deliver free bread to 1 in every 5 adults, forever, funded by Washington, from farms in Brazil. That was Rome. And every emperor knew the rule. If the bread stops, the city burns. In the year 22 AD, the Emperor Tiberius stood before the Roman Senate. Crops had failed in Egypt. There were riots over food prices. The grain dole was draining the imperial treasury. And Tiberius, one of the most ruthless men ever to rule Rome, looked at the senators and said, "If we cut the grain, the state is finished." The emperor of the most powerful civilization on earth just admitted that his empire's survival depended on a shipment of wheat from Africa. Rome had built the ultimate dependency. And dependencies, as we're about to see, have a way of becoming weapons in the wrong hands. Before I tell you whose hands those were, let me ask you something. Look around your kitchen tonight. The coffee, the fruit, the wheat in your bread. Almost none of it grew where you live. So tell me in the comments, what's one food you eat every week that traveled more than 1,000 miles to reach you? You'd be surprised how Roman we still are. Now, back to those hands. To find those hands, we have to leave Rome behind. We have to go north, beyond the Rhine, to a tribe most Romans had never heard of. Their king was a man named Genseric, king of the Vandals. He was probably born around the year 389, in a tribe most Romans had never heard of. By his 30s, he was leading 100,000 of his people across Europe, through Gaul, into Spain, fleeing the Huns, who were destroying everything behind them. In 429, Genseric did something nobody expected. He gathered every Vandal, every warrior, every woman, every child, 80,000 people in total. And he loaded them onto ships. And he crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Africa. For 10 years he marched east, city by city, coastline by coastline. Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, the modern names of provinces that, back then, fed the world's largest city. And then, on October 19th, 439 AD, Genseric reached Carthage, the second city of the Western Empire, the port from which a fleet of 1,500 ships had sailed to Rome every year for half a millennium. And the Romans, who had ruled the Mediterranean for 700 years, never saw it coming. Genseric took Carthage without a real fight, not because his army was unstoppable, but because Rome was looking the other way, fighting the Visigoths in Gaul, fighting the Huns in the east, fighting itself in 3 civil wars at the same time. And in a single afternoon, the Vandal king walked into the harbor that fed Rome. Now, before I tell you what he did with it, I have to be honest with you about something. The story I'm about to tell isn't the only version historians accept. Some serious historians, like Jason Lin at California Polytechnic State University, have published research suggesting that Rome didn't actually starve after 439, that the Vandals kept sending grain, just less of it, and that Roman fields could make up the difference. Walter Goffert, one of the most respected late Rome scholars alive, goes even further. He spent 40 years arguing that the Western Empire didn't really fall. It just peacefully merged with the people we call barbarians. That much of the Roman West came under barbarian control in an orderly fashion, with many barbarians settled in the provinces without disrupting the settled population. These aren't conspiracy theories. They're published in real academic journals by respected scholars. They deserve to be heard. But whatever wheat reached Rome after October 439, if any reached at all, didn't come as taxation anymore. It didn't come on Roman ships. It came on Vandal ships when Genseric felt like sending it. And it stopped completely when he didn't. For 5 centuries, Africa's wheat had been Rome's by law. Now it was Rome's by permission. And the man giving permission had no reason to be generous. The moment Genseric closed his fist around that harbor, Rome's 500-year supply chain collapsed. Think about what that means. For half a millennium, the wheat from North Africa had been Rome's by law, by treaty, by imperial right. The ships sailed because they had to. Refusing was treason. Now the ships sailed only when a Vandal king felt like loading them. And Genseric, for the next 38 years of his reign, used Rome's hunger as a weapon. He didn't just stop the grain. He turned the empire's own logistics against it. With the Roman shipyards of Carthage, he built a Vandal navy. And in the year 455, he sailed it straight to the city of Rome itself. For 2 weeks, the Vandals walked through Rome. They took the gold. They took the bronze tiles off the roof of the Temple of Jupiter. They took the treasures Titus had looted from Jerusalem 400 years earlier and carried them back to Carthage. They left the city standing, but they had made a point. Rome could no longer protect itself, not even from a kingdom that hadn't existed 60 years before. Then came the slow death. Without African grain, the population of Rome began to vanish, from 1 million people in the 2nd century to 800,000 by the year 410, to 500,000 after Genseric took Carthage, to 100,000 by the year 500, to barely 30,000 by the early Middle Ages. Imagine New York City, today, emptying out until only a small town remained inside the skyscrapers. That's what happened to Rome, slowly, year by year, as the bread stopped coming, and every emperor who tried to fix it faced the same impossible math. You cannot raise an army without taxes. You cannot collect taxes without provinces. You cannot hold provinces without an army. And you cannot do any of it on an empty stomach. The Western Roman Empire didn't die in a battle. It died of hunger. And the man who held the knife to its throat for 4 decades was the same Vandal king who had crossed into Africa with 80,000 of his people looking for a home. He found one, and the world's greatest empire was the price. 1,500 years after Genseric closed his fist around Carthage's harbor, your breakfast depends on the same fragile thread. Look at the loaf of bread on your kitchen counter, the one I asked you to think about at the beginning of this video. That wheat probably crossed an ocean to reach you. The flour mill that ground it runs on imported grain. The truck that delivered it burns fuel refined from oil that traveled through shipping lanes controlled by foreign governments. And right now, those lanes are shaking. In June of 2025, a single cyber attack hit a company most people had never heard of. United Natural Foods, the main supplier for Whole Foods. Within days, shelves across America were empty. Not because there wasn't food, because the computers couldn't move it. In the Strait of Hormuz, where 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil on Earth passes through, conflict has paralyzed shipping for months. And the United Nations is now warning that 45 million more people could fall into acute hunger by the end of this year, pushing the global total to a record 363 million. 363 million human beings. One bad year away from starvation. Now, think about your own city. If the truck stopped tomorrow, how long would the supermarkets last? Most experts say 3 days, maybe 4. Then the shelves are empty. We've built Rome all over again. Every major city in the world now lives on imported food. Every meal you eat travels further than any Roman could have imagined. And the choke points, the Carthages of our century, aren't just one harbor anymore. They're the Strait of Hormuz, the Panama Canal, the Suez, the undersea cables, the computers that route every truck. Rome had one Genseric to worry about. We have dozens. And every empire that ever fell, from Rome to the Soviets to 100 others history has forgotten, fell the same way, not in a battle, but in the moment its people opened their cupboards and found them empty. An empire is only as strong as its next meal, yours included. Subscribe for more hidden connections and watch this next.